we are growing. We're at 160 people right now. Our firm is based on innovation and technology. There's a variety of non-immigrant visas. Non-immigrant visas give you the right to live and in many instances work in the United States, travel in and out. So you've got a choice of different visas, but the E1 is the treaty trader. We're not talking about trading today. We are talking about the E2 treaty investor. And then there's numerous green card options. EB1, employment-based first preference, EB2, EB3, EB4, national interest waivers, family, diversity. But again, we are only talking about EB5. And here's a very important slide. I noticed in checking it last night that they had left off Montenegro, so we've updated that. I think it's 81 countries. China, Republic of China, Taiwan has the treaty. Pakistan has the treaty. India and China do not have treaties. So if you're from a country that does not have a treaty, we will talk to you later about CBI, citizenship by investment. It's an extra step, but we're doing the Turkish program right now, the Grenada program, and Montenegro program is a little bit expensive. I don't really like it. Turkish is my favorite, Grenada my second favorite. There may be others, but if you don't have the correct nationality, well, then get it. Common to be able to obtain a second passport through investment or through a gift. All right, so let's focus on the requirements for an E2. I don't like, oh, by the way, I put a lot of material in here because at the end of this presentation, we will be sending you the PowerPoint. So my idea was that you could actually use this PowerPoint as a resource. Share it with your friends. Of course, that's good marketing for me too, if you share it with your friends. But the purpose of putting all this material in here is so that you can go back and look at some of the key elements. So I've already spoken about the first point, nationality. If you don't have the correct nationality, then you have to acquire the correct nationality if you want to do an E2. So you can also just Google the term E2 countries quite easily. And I know Patrick's got that stuff on his website as well. Point number 2. This is the big one. You, the investor, have to make a substantial investment. And what does the word substantial mean? Well, we evaluate substantial in relation to the specific investment. So I always use the example, I want to build supersonic aircraft. I think the investment amount would probably be about 1 billion or something if you want to build supersonic aircraft. So if that's the particular business. But if you were going to look at an elderly care business or one of the businesses that Patrick is, and I haven't seen what he's presenting today, that will be in the second part of our presentation, but it has to be substantial in relation to that type of investment. Sometimes I will tell people, well, okay, you want to open up a small restaurant, you know, 250. Yeah, sure, no problem. Actually, the thing that I like to see in addition to the investment amount is job creation. Now, nowhere in the E2 do they really talk about job creation, but if you jump below to the 4th point, you will see I've highlighted the word significant economic contribution. So, I mean, if you're going to create one part-time job in your business plan, how does that contribute to significant economic contribution? Well, maybe your revenue, maybe your sales, but that phrase is absolutely critical. Now, there are different roles that you can play, and we're going to talk about that as well. I'm going to push Patrick on that because actually that is a requirement. So the principal investor will direct and develop. Direct and develop, what does that mean? Or you could be a manager or employee with special skills. So one of the other nice things about an E2 is, let's assume you come from Argentina and you do an investment, and your best friend happens to be a CPA, you can potentially bring your best friend with you. And by the way, Joey, you're going to have to confirm this for me as well. I just saw yesterday that spouses now of L's and E's are getting automatic work authorization upon entry, and it's being notated. Did you see that email that was sent out in the office from LAX where they're coding it as an L2S, which is a work authorized category? This is huge. Not only do you get the work visa, but the spouse gets the work visa, and it's automatic. Bingo, we just got 2 for 1, and they can both. But here's the nice part about this, and I absolutely love this. But be careful with it, because the spouse has unrestricted employment authorization. Unrestricted. So, you know, if your spouse has always wanted to flip burgers at McDonald's, their lifelong dream job, bingo, you get the E2. The spouse gets to go and work at McDonald's and flip burgers. I would probably choose In-N-Out Burger if I was in California, but those I prefer. But silliness aside, that's a very important consideration, that spouses can in fact obtain automatic work authorization.
Bernie, to add in, it's a good time to be an employee. So, you know, if your spouse is able to get a job and make 5K, 6K, 10K a month while the business scales up, you know, that's money for the family.
I don't know about you, Patrick, but you know what happened? I brought my wife into the company 8 years ago. Now she's the boss, all right? So, you know, there's also a danger I could get fired soon. I'm always wondering whether my wife...
It's better to keep it separate.
In some ways, it could be, because warning about bringing your spouse into the business, better to like have her go and work somewhere else. But no, in our case, quite frankly, I'm joking, but I'm not. My wife is the reason for the success of our company right now. She's a smart technology person.
One thing to add here, Bernie, and just to answer one of the questions that was raised is related to the nationality of the spouse. Does the nationality of the spouse need to have the same?
Great question, and I love that. No, no, no. We don't care which passport your spouse or children have. They become automatically eligible. So we often have that situation where one spouse has the correct treaty country and the other doesn't. But you have to be a little bit careful. If your spouse has never worked and has been a homemaker all of his life, if your husband has been a homemaker and looks after the kids and has never worked, and you then putting your husband up as the principal applicant, there is this question of whether the individual is qualified. So be careful. There is this requirement. They do expect you to be able to play an active role, and we're going to go into that in more depth. But I want to go back to three more words on this PowerPoint: real and operating. Real and operating. What is an E2? Now, one of the things I don't like about E2s is every consul's different. Every post is different. The consuls in Japan, for example, are really good on E's. The consuls in some other places are not as good. All right. So you go in, you apply for the E2. I had this once in a European post. They had invested, quite frankly, about $2 million in a restaurant, hired all the staff, went in for the E, and the consul said, no, I'll give you a B1 visa. I'm not ready to give you an E2 because the business has not opened. If it's a restaurant, I want to see a menu and you are ready to open. And I'm like, come on. Anyway, that was the consul. He was mean to me. Scratch that. He was mean to the client. But he is focusing on the word real and operating. How can it be operating if you haven't opened the business? Well, how do you open the business if you don't have the work visa? But there are the B1 business visitor and a visa waiver version of it. So they expect you to come in on the B1, which is not easy. So the purpose again is to enhance economic interaction, make a significant impact. This is not a retirement visa. Need to be clear. This is not a retirement visa. So moving on, advantages of the E2, and there are many advantages to the E2. Most countries, there's a word you have to learn on the E called visa reciprocity. The reason I don't like the Montenegro E is, and I haven't checked it, well, when I last checked it, I think it's like a 1-year E2 treaty. And Turkey, Grenada, Italy, France, all the other countries, 5 years, generally speaking. So you can get a 5-year visa, but be careful, it's kind of confusing. You get a 5-year visa. Visa allows you to present yourself at the airport. When you enter the country, you automatically get admitted for 2 years, provided your passport's valid for the relevant period. 2-year admission. So every 2 years, you can either pay me money to file an extension or do it yourself, but they're tricky. Or you can travel. So I tell my clients, go home for Christmas. Go home for the holidays. And when you come back, you get a 2-year extension. The problem we have is sometimes one spouse travels and the other doesn't, and you cannot let your status expire. So there's E2 visa, which is the stamp in the passport, and E2 status, which is something you get at the airport. Now,
Montenegro is 12 months.
Montenegro is 12 months. That's what I thought. The bottom line is, I don't like it as a CBI, citizenship by investment, because if you don't have the right passport, you get a Montenegrin passport, you only get a 1-year visa, and every year you have to renew it. This is the problem we have with the Mexican E. That also used to be 5 years, and they reduced the reciprocity schedule down to 1 year. But the good news with the Mexican E's and most countries is you can get them renewed with a mail-in. You don't actually have to like go for a personal
Thankfully, Bernie, they recently revised in Mexico back to 4 years.
Yay!
It's great. Like Chile went down to 1 year, so it's a moving target.
Thank you for correcting. As I was saying it, I'm like, have I not read they just changed that recently?
I mean, you have to check on the State Department before.
I know, but I goofed it. The bottom line
I'm
is,
saying whoever's looking to apply for the E2, it's like that day you need to be looking and before you.
And the
apply.
other thing they did with like the Australian one is they added a ridiculous fee of like a couple $1,000s. I mean,
Usually
wow.
what? It's $200-300.
Oh, generally speaking, it's only the visa fee, but there are also reciprocal fees. So the Aussies charge Americans, the Australians charge the Americans, so it's a reciprocal. But I am actually really happy to hear that Mexico has moved back to 4, because that was a really big headache for us. But and I think, Joe, you mentioned this. The bottom line is you have to check that every time, because it does change. It doesn't change that often, but it does change. So the other good news is that children can study in public or private schools. Now, here's something a lot of people do not know. When you're on an E2, you can acquire in-state tuition. So how much does it cost to go to UCLA if you're an international student? I don't really know, but it's probably over $50,000. And what if you qualify for in-state tuition? We're looking at 25 or something. Again, my numbers are not up to date. But the bottom line is you can literally, if you've got a couple kids, save hundreds of thousands of dollars. You've got 3 or 4 kids because you're on an E2 rather than sending them on an F1. Because on an F1, they can never, student visa, they can never become residents. Whereas if the parents are on E2s and have been here and live here, then the children can qualify for in-state tuition at a lot of the state schools. So there you are. You just got all your money back. The E2 can be extended very often indefinitely. In some instances, you're not going to avoid worldwide taxation, because once you've been here for more than 6 months on an E, you are potentially subject to worldwide taxation. I do not give tax advice, but I do have to mention this point. But if you are an E2 and you're able to keep below the 183-day threshold, which is a 3-year look back, You have to look at the last 3 years, 180 days. So it's number of days in the current year plus 1/3 of the days prior to that, plus 1/6 of the days in the year prior to that with a 3-year look back. If you're under 180, so you can't really spend more than 100 days in the US, but you don't have to be here full time. And I find that with a lot of investors and high net worth people, they may have a house in the Bahamas. They may have a house in the south of France. And they may have, a house somewhere else and spend a couple months a year in each place running their businesses.
Bernie, we could easily have like a webinar with a tax professional, but just give 2 recent items. We've seen that sometimes one of the spouses does the EB-5 visa, the other one does the E-2 and comes and goes. And then for folks with over 20 mil net worth, a lot of times they'll live in the US, but they structure with their tax professional where they're not going to pay a big estate tax on that 20 mil that's out of the US. So it's probably warrants a good webinar because there's a lot of benefits on the fiscal side of the E-2 visa.
Patrick, I work with a couple of great tax lawyers, and maybe that's a good idea.
Yeah.
You've got to do some tax planning. You don't mess with the IRS. Okay, it's my favorite line. A lot of foreign nationals, they don't quite understand because the tax framework is less rigid, but don't mess with the IRS in the US. Do your tax planning. You don't want to get any surprises, and that type of thing where one spouse may be resident, the other may not. One spouse may have all the assets, the other may not. That's what happened to me. I got married, now I'm poor. Stop that, Bernie. Anyway, this is a visa that you apply directly at the US consulate. That is the best way to do it. There is a way to do it in the US. I discourage that because if you do it in the US, as soon as you travel outside the United States, you have to get it stamped. And that stamping is not a routine procedure. So why not start off by having it stamped in the beginning? Some posts will take about 2 or 3 months. We had terrible COVID backlogs. Some posts are still COVID backlogged, but we are seeing improvement in terms of processing time. So this is repetitious, can be a franchise. You can open a new business or purchase an existing business. Now, opening a new business obviously works nicely. Purchasing a business works. Purchasing a business almost always does not work for direct EB-5. So now we're talking about E-2. We're also going to talk about converting an E-2 to an EB-5. But when you purchase an existing business, it's hugely complicated because they want you to create a new commercial enterprise, and yet they won't tell you what it is. They don't tell you what a new commercial enterprise is when you purchase an existing business in the scope, in the framework of an E-2. So it gets very confusing and difficult. Sometimes that's why I do like a franchise, because it's clean. You can show the new business, you can show the job creation, you can show the economic impact, you can show the new US employees who weren't there before.
We'll talk on the buying the business side later in the presentation, but it takes a long time to find that business and do like a proper due diligence because the data is not readily available. And you made the point on the IRS, buying a business under $1 million, they're generally not running it super compliant in a compliant way. There should be employees that are being paid as contractors. There should be actual employees and they're being marked as a 1099 contractor. And even worse, people are getting cash, which is very commonplace in South Florida and Miami, which we have the good and bad of Latin America, and a lot of small businesses pay cash. And you don't necessarily want to be starting your American dream with a business that is operating in the black.
That's helpful, Patrick. Again, sorry, Patrick is the managing partner of Visa Franchise. When people talk to me about, oh, well, I'm interested in buying a business, can you make any recommendations? I say to them, look, I'm sure there are good business brokers somewhere, but what I understand is it's very hard to find a good business broker who actually will do the correct due diligence for you. So I think Patrick's warning is good. I just use the general warning: be careful, be careful, be careful. Do due diligence. You're buying a business. You don't know what you're buying, and you will be inheriting, generally, even with indemnifications, certain liabilities, possibly tax liabilities. So filing procedures, applications filed at the post. We talk a little bit here about third country processing. Sometimes you can apply in a third country. This is discretionary. At the moment, third country processing is not greatly favored, but this is a very important thing. We're not going to go in the weeds on this. If you're doing business in the third country, you're more likely to be accepted. But the general rule is they want you to apply in your home country. So that can be a challenge if your home country is terribly backlogged in scheduling appointments. So sometimes we will go with TCN processing. We consider ourselves pretty good. Schedule appointments, submit your application. Some of the big posts, the Big 10, they work differently with ease. They want you to register the company first. So London, Japan, et cetera, the primary posts, they have a two-step procedure. First, you register the company, and then you apply for the individual. So what sort of services do we meaning WR, provide? We can help you getting that CBI, the Citizenship by Investment Passport. Again, our two favorite countries, Grenada and Turkey. We will help you prepare the E2 visa application. We will discuss with you choice of consulate, prepare you for the consulate interview, make sure you have all the documents, and we will introduce you to a business plan writer, make sure that I actually work with the, you do need if you choose a franchise lawyer, I work with Patrick's referral on that, because that person is pretty good. So again, I spoke earlier about E2 status versus E2 visas. This is why I encourage you to get the E2 visa first, because if you only get status when you travel, you lose that status and need to get the visa. So I encourage people to get the visa, and then you're going to get a 2-year period of admission. This is all a little bit out of date. Literally yesterday, the E2 spouse automatically, it's incident to status, automatically gets work authorization. This is a huge one, because
it depends on the entry, right? Because it's different depending on your port of entry at this point, right?
At this point, correct.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
I think within a few weeks, we'll probably see it nationwide. I think they're rolling it out. I'm not sure if it's a pilot at this point, to be honest. I didn't actually study it. I just saw that one of our clients got one, an L2S, which was kind of exciting. Please be aware, minor children can attend school. They cannot work. So the work authorization does not include the children, which is sad, but it's the way it's going to work. And there's no even discretionary basis for children to get work authorization. So that's kind of an issue on ease, because if the kid's going to turn 21, you've got to start focusing on the green card. The E2 alone is fine, potentially for the adults, but for the children, when they turn 21, what happens then? Send them back home. Yeah, sure, just kick the kids out. That doesn't work too well. So, you know, you've got to start thinking about a green card if they are getting into 16, 17, they're going to want to work in summer jobs, etc. So I mentioned this as well. You file with US, you get a 2-year approval. The one that we're recommending, and that 2 to 3 months should be in parentheses because it really varies by post. The procedure we prefer: file with the consulate or embassy, attend a visa interview, and then you can enter the US and you'll get your 2-year stay. Look, there's something I kind of wanted to talk about because it's important. The EB-5 processing time is terrible. Now, generally speaking, almost any application can be expedited, but you have to have compelling reasons. We like healthcare, we like humanitarian. Financial loss, it's there, but it's not that effective. So the big news here with the E2, employment authorization is immediate. For the L, immediate. For the spouses, immediate. With the regional center program, and I'm not going to really talk about it because we're waiting for reauthorization, you can anticipate that it will take at least 6 months after you file the adjustment, which is the second stage, assuming you're in the US. So obtaining work authorization through the EB-5 program is actually slow.